Welcome back to The Legal Code, the channel dedicated to discussing legal topics both in the news and in pop culture so that you can learn and be informed about what's going on around you. Whether that's celebrities getting into legal trouble or whether law meets technology, we cover a broad range of legal topics. If you like that sort of thing, don't forget to like and subscribe and of course share. And in this video, we are going to discuss marriage, the laws of marriage, estate planning, and what the Sex and the City reboot got right and wrong about the death of the character John Preston, the character played by Chris Noth. Unfortunately, during this time of the filming of this video, he died not only on the show, but also metaphorically because he has been accused of sexual assault by several women. But we'll discuss those allegations at a later date. So I have always been a Sex and the City fan. I grew up watching the show. My friends and I watch it religiously, especially my girlfriend Sandra. We were really looking forward to the reboot to see how Hollywood would portray these older women. I was really young when the show was out, so I was curious to see how the characters would evolve, even in the absence of Samantha. So I was, of course, excited to see the fashion and these women returning to our screen and to see how they were going to tackle what they were dealing with in their everyday lives now that they are in their 50s. So this video is pretty much about episode 3. So if you have not seen episode 3, there will be spoilers, just so you know. In the end of episode 1, we see the death of John Preston, Mr. Big, aka, and then you see his funeral followed in episode 2. And then in episode 3, we see the curtains go up and we get a glimpse into who John was. And this man had some secrets that he took to the grave. Not surprising. Throughout the series, he was always sort of an enigmatic character. We never really got to know much about him, other than being a serial tomcat. With his affairs and being emotionally unavailable, he was never really present for Carrie in a way that a partner should show up. But again, this is Hollywood. What we did gather was surface and superficial. He was a businessman of some sort. We finally learned, and he worked in investment. As we were watching the show through Carrie's eyes, he was puzzling and mysterious, even to Carrie, which the show portrayed through her eyes. He was always the object of torture for Carrie because he just would not settle down and commit to her. You could just not pin him down. He was such an evasive character. Nevertheless, we knew that she loved him. There was not much character development to show him as an endearing character to love. But Carrie was silly, and obviously she didn't need legitimate reasons to love him. So now that you have some context, or if I'm reminding you of the character, let's move into the quasi-legal stuff. So when Carrie and Big got married, as the lawyer, I was curious about his wealth and the bridging of their assets. After all, this show was supposed to reflect Manhattan modern women with elements of fantasy. So it was not far-fetched for me to question and for the writers to attack what modern day women encounter when they get married, which is unification of the assets, which is money. But the writers ignored that aspect, and they ignored connecting those dots for us, and instead focused on the opulence, the fashion, and the fantasy aspects of the show, which I wish they played into the more serious aspect. I get it, the show is about escapism, but I think the audience craves and deserves some reality as well. So we always knew Carrie was a spendthrift. She loved to shop. She was successful in her career as an acclaimed writer, but she was not the breadwinner. And so she did rely on John Preston. She didn't need him, but of course he elevated her status financially. So when Big died, I of course was immediately curious about his estate plan and if he had one. And he did, not a surprise. He had a will, which was interesting. Yet he had a will that he did not share with Carrie. Carrie did not even know about his estate plan. And then we learned that he bequeathed, or he gave as a gift, $1 million to his previous ex-wife, Natasha, as a gesture of apology for his previous transgressions, which is a surprise to Carrie as well as all viewers, as well as Natasha. So with this news, we see Carrie spiraling for answers, trying to piece together who this man is, who was the man that she married. And she realized that she did not know as much as she thought she should have known, being his wife. We see her trying to look through his wallet to piece together clues and figure out who he was. She didn't even know that he had a pet. She could not figure out his computer password to log on to his computer. And that hit me. How many of us, if our spouse died, our mother, our father, would we be able to access this information? Not to be a spy, I'm not talking about unscrupulous behavior, but to connect the loose ends when someone dies. It is inevitable that there will be loose ends when someone passes away because they leave suddenly. Their password for their phone, their email password, their computer password, their bank account password, pertinent information, and many of us will be locked out and in the dark, as we saw Carrie was. I saw that and I said I needed to do a video just to talk to you about this. So with so much tragedy and death around us currently, this is a subject that I cannot take lightly. But there are steps that we can all take to ease the loss of a loved one. That involves getting our affairs in order and helping them to get their affairs in order, our loved ones, that is. Carrie, although a fictional character, is not unlike many women in real life whose spouse dies and they realize they know very little about their partners, whether that's extramarital children that they didn't know exist. They thought they worked somewhere else where in fact they haven't worked that place in a long time, or that they purchased a house without you knowing. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the secrets. I'm not here to judge about whether that's right or wrong. I'm here to help mitigate the impact of death by helping you develop a plan so that when a loved one dies, you aren't scrambling for answers and you can grieve with dignity. So here is what we can learn from the Sex and the City reboot. Some of you may be young, I know. So estate planning is so far off and you can't even fathom that it's necessary for your life because you haven't developed wealth and assets yet and you think it's something wealthy people do. But I'm here to inform you. When you get married, it's time to start planning for sudden death. Even if you're 25 years old, when you're married, it's no longer about you. It's imperative you plan for your sudden passing. Whether you're the breadwinner or not, whether you're the housewife or not. If you bought a house with your spouse, it's time to think about, can either one of you afford to keep that home and the lifestyle you currently have in the absence of the other? This is why estate planning is important. It forces you to envision the worst possible scenario, the loss of your partner, your spouse, and you plan from there. So that if that loved one dies, you already have a plan in place where you can mourn that person and you don't have to be crippled financially on top of grieving. It's not a bad idea to know your partner's password to their devices and accounts. I know in this age of privacy, I know I'm probably going to get a lot of pushback for this, but privacy is a premium to a certain extent. And people are reticent about sharing passwords. But if there's nothing questionable going on, and this is about serious stuff of planning if you pass away and access for next of kin, if you're in a committed, loving relationship, this is not a big deal. Again, this is not about snooping. This is for emergency situations. It does not even have to be death. It could be that the person's in the hospital and certain bills need to be paid and someone needs access. What I could recommend is leave the passwords in a common place that each of you can access if needed. This also requires trust that one will not be snooping and that you will have a conversation about this in an open and transparent way. Also, if you have loved ones like divorced or widowed parents, it does not hurt to know their password either, for the same reason explained earlier, that you may need to access their information if they're in a hospital, if they're passed suddenly. Keep this information in a safe place. Many of us have old school secretive parents. Let me tell you, that benefits no one. So impress this upon your parents and tell them to get serious about their estate plan. Next, your bank account information. You should not be the only person named on your bank account. If you are single and you're not comfortable adding anyone as a joint account holder, you can name a beneficiary to the bank account. I recommend this no matter what. If you're unmarried, name your parents as a beneficiary or a best friend, but do not have your name be the only name on the bank account. Because in the event something happens, you have an untimely death, you don't want to leave the people behind scrambling to deal with your assets. When there's a beneficiary or a joint account holder in place and you pass, all they would have to do is go to the bank with your death certificate and they can take out the money. If you're married and your spouse is not on your account, don't assume that the spouse will have access just by showing the marriage license. It doesn't work like that. That person will be locked out and have to probate that account and your estate. Essentially, your surviving husband or wife will have to go to court and probate your assets, which means the state determines the rightful heir, which could take months or years. If the bank account is solely titled to the person who died, then the bank account will be frozen. There's sort of like an APB goes out when someone passes away, that everything is locked, to prevent fraud. So the family will be unable to access the account until an executor has been appointed by the probate court. Avoid this headache by just adding a beneficiary or a joint account holder to the account. Next, if you have a family and you are married, you need an estate plan. If you had one prior to marriage, it's time to revisit that estate plan and make some changes. It is advisable and sensible that married couples do estate planning together so that each spouse should know what to expect. Statistically, men die before women, and most husbands want to leave their wife in the best financial position possible, which drafting a will or a trust and other estate planning vehicles allow. Taking it back to the Sex and the City reboot, we see that Big had an estate plan, but Carrie was unaware of the particulars and details of it. The mystery continues of this man, but the mystery was revealed in his will, which seemed consistent with his character, who wanted to do things on his own terms and not yield to the marriage. We see that because we are surprised that Big bequeathed the $1 million to Natasha, his ex-wife, as a surprise to all of us, including Carrie. Estate planning should happen at major life events. That includes marriage, divorce, death, birth of a child, purchasing a home. This is when people should think about their affairs and get them into order. In this case, we see Big and Carrie got married, and obviously John went and did an estate plan, but that was not on the radar for Carrie. Although they were relatively young, they married maybe 10, 15 years ago, it doesn't matter. Marriage is an optimal time to get an estate plan in place, even more so if you're not as wealthy as this character. It seemed reckless that this was not discussed throughout their relationship, to discuss and then make changes every few years if necessary. The fact that Carrie was surprised of the will surprised me and let me know that they were both living rather adolescent lives separately and did not have the real conversations about marriage, death, money. The fact that she was okay with this lets me not even feel empathetic to her character because she chose to be blissfully ignorant. Also, he was a man with a sizable amount of assets. It's likely that he should have had a trust to avoid the taxation and solve the privacy problem. So that was a mistake, I believe, on the writer's part. It seems more likely at creating a trust to give Natasha the $1 million rather than bequeathing in his will seem like a technical oversight, but it doesn't even really matter for the purpose of this video. Nevertheless, these are the takeaways from the reboot. Carrie is still extremely adolescent, as we can see. Aside from the fashion, the episode presented a really serious issue about us getting our affairs in order and to speak with our loved ones to implore them to get theirs in order as well. I'm sure a lot of women have been in Carrie's position. Have an estate plan in place, speak to your husband, anticipate if he passes away, what's next? Can you afford this home? Can you afford this nanny? Can you afford to live how you're currently living? These are terribly uncomfortable questions, and no one wants to imagine their life without their husband. But it's imperative that you do this exercise and then you continue on enjoying your life. Hopefully the information on this video has been helpful. Let me know what your thoughts are. Don't forget to comment and like and subscribe. And and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Also, how about how they were hot potatoing the $1 million around? Like Natasha didn't want it, Carrie didn't want. Like, I thought that was so interesting. I don't know how accurate that is, but I could tell you many people will be thankful for $1 million no matter how the relationship broke down. That's an adequate gesture of apology for many people. I thought I'd throw that in there.